Welcome to the Last Talk Show. Tonight, we're talking to Michael McCullers, writer for The Spy Who Shagged Me and Austin Powers and Goldmember. Let's talk to Michael.
All the way from the island of Nantucket, Massachusetts, it's the Last Talk Show! The Last Talk Show!
Wait, you're not recording, are you?
I did just hit record, but I can pause.
Hold on, I'm turning my phone off.
This is really fun. It's a way for people to see how the sausage is made, which is a Hollywood term.
Don't show this part, though.
But this is sometimes the most exciting part, the behind the scenes.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired. We showed Have a Good Trip at the movies last night at the big screen.
Oh, wow. At the drive-in of which we speak. Did you interview yourself for the people?
I actually did. I interviewed Paul Scheer, and then that led to a new segment we have called The Hot Seat, which led to putting our producer Mike Rosenstein in the hot seat, which led to him going, "Why don't you ask the director?" And then I did an interview with the director.
Well, why don't we put the director in the hot seat?
That's not a bad idea. Okay. Hey, Donick, welcome to the show. Thrilled to talk to you, the director of Have a Good Trip. Thanks for having me. First of all, I just wanted to tell you, I love this movie. I think that the direction, the writing, the production, everything was just like top notch. You seem like a really talented, amazing director, writer, creative. This movie was groundbreaking and like nothing ever before. And, I'm a huge fan. Thank you. So that was pretty exciting.
The hot seat feels a little bit like I'm being blindsided here.
Yeah, he was blindsided. I have no hot seat issues for you.
Hot seat. Why is Austin Powers so sexist and a little bit racist when you go back and watch it now? I don't want to answer.
Well, that's a great place to start.
Internet connect. My internet is bad.
I don't know. We don't have to get into that stuff. But
no, you're welcome to, because I can't remember anything else. I'm trying to think about anything I did on those movies so long ago. But I did watch the first one, which I think you showed, right? So I watched it not that long ago with my kids, because there's always some kid at my house. I have so many kids. Somebody's always getting to the age where they think they want to see it or whatever. It's like pretty funny and you're kind of proud of it, but you're like, it's always meant to be cringy as part of it, but then there's different kinds of cringes and you're like, oh, like I wish he weren't so like date rapey with Elizabeth Hurley and
right
stuff. And I was thinking about it. I think it's hard. Like that was always the movies were always making fun of a even further back time period, obviously, and James Bond in a genre that was really sexist and often racist. So we were trying to make fun of that, and that was part of the joke. But then when you add 20 years to our movie, I think that context gets lost, and you go, oh, that's just another one of those old movies that's super racist or sexist.
Funny that the way that you point out racism and sexism through comedy has to change also.
Yeah, we thought it was enough back then probably just to say like, hey, wasn't it funny when they used to do that? You know what I mean? Like, we'll sort of recreate it. Remember when movies were like that, but without much more commentary than that? You know what I mean? I mean, I guess, Austin Powers is supposed to learn a little bit of a lesson and be a little less sexist and stuff, but he still doesn't come out of it as
fully woke.
No, he's not as woke as we would like to have him, probably.
Is there a way, like, if I don't know, if you're making Austin Powers 1 now,
if I were doing another one, he could be frozen again. You know what I mean? At this point, like, he could be frozen in the 90s at his second heyday and thawed again, and he would still be out of date.
I thought I would start just asking you about a little bit, like, how we met and where that was in the timeline of Austin Powers and what we were up to.
Oh my God, I was going to ask you that to remind. I literally was going to ask you because you and I met to do an Austin Powers animated show, which that's how we met. We were put together not to not to be, didn't happen for various reasons. We don't have to get into those.
Well, we don't have to go into, but I do think it's interesting that it did happen, sort of.
It did happen. We did a lot of the show, but was it after Austin Powers 2 came out and was a big hit? Because that makes sense. Or was it before it came out? I really had trouble.
I believe that I don't totally know. I did find an article just randomly when I was doing a little Austin Powers research that was like, Austin Powers cartoon set to come out. We did about 10 episodes. There's a box in my basement with those in it. It's a top secret time capsule that has now been frozen from 1999.
I think if people were to read those now, I think you have to keep those sealed. Like, that's how impactful I think they would be.
It would change show business as we know it. So
it might resurrect show business. That could be a good thing. Bring people back to the theater.
Partly the idea was that it was found in the vaults and was from the 60s, so that
right.
We're actually writing commercial breaks from 60s England that would go into the.
Oh, right. I forgot. Yeah, we did have a lot of. We had like fake interstitials and fake commercials and funny things.
Like weird tooth polish and
right.
and Bovrils and things like that would go in. But the one other thing about the series which was a funny way, I think the reason we've remained good friends was because we did this job. We never had the stress of actually running the show, except
right.
We kind of got to screw around for 3 months and think of stories. And then we were on pause for about 3 months while they figured out if it was going to go forward. So we would come into the office every day and we set up a dartboard and we got like Madden football and we had a staff of people who would just kind of hang out with us every day.
And we had very nice people. We had a very nice staff of talented people, some of whom have done extremely well and are super funny people. So it was like that was a fun time. And yeah, if we actually had to run a show, we would have hated each other. It was an interesting, that whole franchise, just like the first movie came out and was a modest hit in theaters, at that time. Like, I think it made $54 million, which was a little more back in those dollars, but not a ton, but it didn't cost anything. But then it had this crazy life on home video. It used to be a thing called home video. And it actually was a moment where VHS turned into DVD. So it sold like a ton on VHS and then sold a ton on DVD. So that was actually like a slow moving, it had a big tail, I guess you'd call it, where like, so even as we were doing the show and probably before shooting this second movie, like nobody knew the second movie would be that big, but the first one was like this big revenue generator just on home video for New Line. And they said at one point, I think, that the second and third movie budgets were paid for by home video money from the first. It worked. It was too much success for our good in terms of the TV show.
Yeah.
That was the general thing of like, oh no, now it's a big one and there will be a third one. And so we don't want to use up our stories and use up the audience's appetite for Austin Powers. Which is funny because there was hardly any restraint. When the second and third movies came out, there was so much marketing, and tie-ins with anything, which is all more common now. But that was the only piece of restraint that was exercised, was like not to exploit it in that one area.
No cartoon series, but Heineken and Volkswagen and Virgin Airways. Yeah.
So the first movie, the funny thing is, and I did not co-write the first movie, I always should have, but I did work on it with Mike from Soup to Nuts. And literally, I think the only tie-in for the first movie was Corn Nuts. Like that was the only, you know what I mean? Like nobody knew what it was going to be. Nobody understood it or thought it would work. And specifically, they didn't think it would work with kids. So that always makes me laugh. That was the real concern, was like, kids don't know James Bond or British stuff. And then it turned into like a kids movie, essentially, or family movie.
One of the things I remember from doing the cartoon series is I came to the office to meet with you and Mike Meyers and just talk in general about what the series would be and how we would tell stories and stuff. And I had sort of prepared some like notes and was like ready, and I was like, whatever. And when I got there, Mike just started talking about comedy theory and comedy references and everything from Dudley Moore to Bob and Ray and Monty Python. And it was like an hour and a half TED talk about like the history of what is good about comedy. And then, and then I felt like as long as I was laughing and going like, great, he was like, great, you're the man for the job then. But I don't remember saying anything in the meeting.
Well, you had a good Meyers meeting then. It worked. It worked. Yeah. I wish Mike would do a TED talk of comedy, because he is like a really, incredible, like self-taught comedy history guy. You know what I mean? Especially in, British stuff or Canadian, some niches that maybe like I didn't know as well. And that's what working for him was like, because I started as his writing assistant, as you know, on the first movie. So we're just like being in the room, being a scribe. But that's how he talks all the time. That's how he thinks about stuff. When he's thinking of the movie, he's like, oh, there's this British, comedian duo in the 50s. We got to get some film of them, or the Carry On movies, which were these very Austin Powers kind of spoofy series of movies. He has all these references, and he'd be like, oh, here's why that's good. Oh, we got to watch it. We got to watch it. So half the workday would just be, watching some movie like that. So it was sort of like comedy grad school,
And Mike seems like somebody who like riffs a little and goes off script. And
right.
How was that on set, being a writer in that process? At what points were you like, Mike, you're not getting what we need? Or are you, how much was,
right.
I'm trying to avoid just saying how much was improv, because that seems
right. Through the process of writing the script or casting and budgeting and rehearsing, if there was much rehearsing, there'd be a lot of improv during all that, and then it would kind of be like, oh, what do we think works best? And then that would go into the script.
Yeah.
So it was not one of those where they're just making that up completely, although there are riffs and verbal riffs and certain jokes, that are definitely improv. Or when Dr. Evil starts doing like shush stuff, Mike probably would have thought of 4 of those. I wrote a few in the script. He thinks of 4 more on set.
Right.
But the scenes were usually pretty structured, because Mike, like, like he wants the movies to work as a movie. And so it's not an outline that was then improv, but
so it's more like there were like little compartments that were like, you're able to riff within.
Yeah, like nuggets. We always call them nuggets. Like that's like a little chunk that something fun can happen. But there's definitely certain, Mindy Sterling, who plays Frau Farbissina, and then Scott. There's certain people who are super great improvers, and it would always be a joy, and they just start having fun, and Mike would get into it a lot. But I'd say he mostly incorporates his improv talent into the script as much as possible.
Talk about test screenings a little bit for Austin Powers 2 and 3, Spy Who Shagged Me and Goldmember. Two things. One, I read somewhere that one of the first cuts was 3.5 hours, which goes to the improv thing a little bit.
Right.
And also, at what point do you test screen it? How do you pick jokes? Is there ever stuff that like they're laughing because it's so dirty or ridiculous, but we can't put that in? Or
there's definitely, because the movies were PG-13 back then. They were not R. So they couldn't go so far. So sometimes we'd always call it like an aftertaste, right? There'd be a joke where it could get a laugh. That particular joke could get a laugh, but you just kind of sense that you're paying a price. You know what I mean? If it's a little too much or a little too unseemly, maybe it hurts the next scene, or something like that. And of course, that sometimes, rarely, you just say, oh, we're just too good for that. Rarely. But
yeah,
you can also see with an audience how the rhythm of jokes, right? So if you're coming off a big nice joke, it really helps the next 2 little jokes. You know what I mean? There's like a wave effect, so you can't really treat them individually. And that's actually really cool to see in front of a test audience. I don't remember screening that long. I can't believe Mike and Jay would show it that long. I'm sure it was that long. You know what I mean? Like when you first cut everything. I don't know if we showed it that long. What I remember is the first movie, the highest it ever tested was like in the 50s, which is abysmal. There's like 5 boxes, and the top 2 are excellent and very good. And so your score is the number of people who click the top 2. Very good or excellent out of 100. So 55 is, not very good. Audience has no idea what it was. They did not understand. And then the second movie and the third movie, as soon as you tested them, literally, I mean, they're funny movies, but just because people knew what it was, you know, and they were like, oh, I'm getting to see the new Austin Powers movie. The scores were above 90 every time, even with a super long cut or whatever, which just shows you the incredible limit of testing as far as those numbers, you know. Again, getting where the laughs are is good, but the numbers are like, one way of testing that stuff is not to have them all in, because they actually don't get a fair, you know, if you leave everything in, you don't get a fair test, right? Because of fatigue and because of that bad joke. The way a good joke can bring a wave, right? You see it all the time. A bad joke is such an energy suck. Like it can destroy jokes that already happened somehow. You know what I mean? So you kind of pick and choose. I remember you always have 3 or 4 screenings, and we would hold back some jokes just because we didn't want to have too much, you know, in any one given scene. And then we look at it and go, yikes, that one didn't work. Let's take that one out. And we have this other thing we can try. And it was pretty scientific. Like we'd have a list of, you know, jokes we wanted to try and not forget about. And at that time, it was one of the first, we had cameras on the audience. You know, as the audience was watching the movie, we'd have cameras filming the audience towards their face, right? So you could see audiences, smiles, laughs, people sleeping, people fidgeting. And we would take the track, the audio track of our audience from the screenings and their laughter and put it over the movie cut, you know, like you would a sitcom or something. I mean, it's all real laughs. So we could, when we then went back to, you know, go back to editing, if we wanted to, we could say, okay, what was the laughs like? Or were people bored or fidgeting? And all the time we'd be like, that joke killed, you know, because it'd be your joke. You're like, that joke definitely worked. And you'd like, all right, let's look at the tape. And it'd be like one guy, you know.
Probably you in the back row, just like.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, so that I'm wrong. And,
those shots of the audience watching the movie now could be a show on its own. That's like what YouTube is.
Right. Exactly. That's a $1 billion empire.
I was going to ask you about how many times. So what was the year of the last movie? Goldmember came out in.
It was pretty. So I remember the second one was 1999 because it's a famous year that's easy to remember. So then I always go off that. So I'm going to say Goldmember, as if neither one of us have the internet.
No way to find out.
But it got to be like 2002, 2003. I mean, it wasn't that long. It definitely wasn't that long, right? But it was very early 2000s, I think.
And in the 18 years or so since the last movie came out, how many times has a fourth movie come up? A forquel, I guess. And what are some of your favorite ideas for that? Or can you not talk about that?
No, we can talk. I mean, I could talk about it because I think it comes up like, feels like it comes up at least like every 4 years or something, you know. And sometimes there's been times when maybe Mike seemed more interested, you know what I mean? Or we had like a good idea that was sort of exciting. And then there are times that it feels like the studio or somebody just, you know, wants to make it come up again. And then the internet feels like it has a life of its own, and it's just recycling those same old stories. But somehow, I guess, an algorithm or Russian bot catches hold of it, and they all feel like news stories again.
Right.
Everyone's excited, and you're like, no, wait, I think it's the same old cycle. We talked, probably the one I like the most, and I think this was out there in rumors, but we talked about doing a very heavy on Dr. Evil movie. You know what I mean? Basically Dr. Evil's movie. So, you know, if you want to be cutesy, instead of Austin Powers 4, it's kind of Dr. Evil 1. You know what I mean? Something that like is really sort of from his point of view with a slightly different tone or more Tim Burton-y world, or, you know, sort of very heavy. And I thought that'd be fun just to sort of, you know, shake it up. But I don't know. I guess it's possible, but you'd have to do it. Like I said, you really have to address our different times, our different political times. And of course, you know, the money thing is hard. Will it make enough money and all that? There's a lot of, I'd love to do animated, you know, Austin Powers movies. Yeah. That would be awesome. Or like Breaking Bad with Dr. Evil, you know, like a 10-part streaming or high-end, kind of show would be really fun. There's definitely stuff that would be fun.
I'm gonna ask you about Beyonce and Britney Spears and Willie Nelson. You're a huge music fan, Michael. You got to work with some of your idols. What was your
Yeah. Hey, Burt Bacharach. There's definitely some cooler Elvis Costello, Burt Bacharach.
Elvis Costello, Matthew Sweet. There's like great music
Matthew Sweet
throughout.
Yeah.
Susanna Hoffs. What was your favorite part musically in working on these?
Eating Beyonce was cool. First of all, she's like 12 years old in that movie. I mean, she's still a young person, it feels like, or younger than, I don't know. I can't believe how young she was. And then theoretically meeting Elvis Costello was cool, although I don't remember talking to him or saying, there's no way I was going to go up to Elvis Costello and be a fool and try to talk to him. I was way too shy.
Just because you mentioned it, so when I was an intern at SNL when I was 19 or so, and was at the SNL party. Famously, they have parties that go until 4 a.m. or whatever. And it was a night where Elvis Costello was on, and I'm a huge Elvis Costello fan.
You are, it's true.
And found myself at the party at a urinal, and Elvis Costello walked in and was at the urinal next to me, and I was like, this is probably my only chance ever to talk to Elvis Costello. So
yes, it's appropriate. I have to
say something, but I really didn't have to say anything. But I like you said, I was too afraid to say anything. And yet I had a couple of beers. So I had enough to go like, Elvis, I just got to tell you, and there's a stupid 19-year-old kid. Great set tonight. You guys sounded great. And he was like urinating and looked at me and then just like finished and walked away. And I was like, oh, don't talk to people when they're peeing. What was it like watching with your kids for the first time? Were there criticisms and or laughs that either were like, yes, I did it, my kids love me, or whoa?
I probably watched it with my son who was maybe 10, and the other one's 12. So they're pretty well suited for the movies. I think that they work pretty well just because they're literally just so colorful, and there's enough random as a comedy style is sort of a thing. So I think there's enough of that they stay, engaged. Basically, there's just so many like cringy like sex jokes that aren't even that dirty. It's almost like if you're going to do them, you wish they were dirtier, so at least your kids thought you were cooler or something. I don't know, like those are the ones, but. Yeah, like when he just takes a super long pee or something like that, it still works. Like 10-year-olds think that's funny, you know what I mean? If I'm watching with like my college-age daughter, she would probably have some more insightful things to say about like some of the other issues we were talking about. But no, I mean I think they play pretty well, and I do think I call it wig comedy, right? Like they'd have like a crazy fake name, right? And a look and a wig and a crazy world that was not our world. So they were pretty big swings comedically, and that's not so in fashion right now, I'd say for the most part, you know what I mean? So I do think it's attention getting just because it's different now at this point. Everything now is a little more improv-y and realistic, right. Or a little more mumbly or something, so when some guy comes on and yells catchphrases at you right down the pike and is dressed, these primary colors, it does get the attention.
This is like intentionally a catchphrase. Like there's many scenes that are just catchphrases lined up after each other into a scene. Were there any catchphrases that didn't make the movie that you're like, how did we not get that one in?
Okay, how could there be, right? There's so many in the movie that how could there not be? Like I would just have on my keyboard F1, F2, all my function keys, right? Just like macros for catchphrases. No, oh God, there must be probably something that I tried to make up. Because those kind of things either are like old, weird, actual British things or, quote unquote catchphrases I find almost always just come from a performer, because it's not really about what the phrase is, you know what I mean? It's always just like the context and the energy or the weird take. Yeah. So it's like, it almost always has to come out of left field, I think, from a performer. But I'd love to remember one that like we kept trying to force in there, but I cannot I think they're all. I think every catchphrase we ever thought of is in there.
If I asked your wife and kids what your catchphrase would be, what would it be?
I don't know, something really depressing and dad like slightly naggy, and
Yeah,
like
maybe that's too depressing. I just was starting the question on myself and go like, what would my
yeah.
kids say? And it'd be like, all right, guys, let's go. Let's wrap it up and get in the car or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to ask that question because I remember like my stepdad would always say, like, he didn't mean to, he didn't make a big deal of it. He'd always say like, let's hit the road, sports fans. That would be like, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember my stepdad's catchphrase. I must have, if I don't, I should.
It'd be nice if we could fall back on our catchphrases once in a while and get like immediate applause from the family.
Yeah, just phone it in.
Dr. Evil is famously based on Lorne Michaels.
Everybody does a Lorne Michaels. That's always, that's the Saturday Night Live thing. Like everybody has their Lorne impression.
And Lorne is a larger than life character. You work with Lorne. You've done movies since with Lorne. Mike clearly is friends with Lorne. How does that play when you're in a room with Lorne that there's been all these movies?
Yeah, you're right. Like the Lorne way to handle that is not mention it. Pretend like it never happened, even though he knows and and then you pretend like it never happened. You know what I mean? So it's so yeah, like I worked on Saturday Night Live after the first movie. So I worked on the first movie, like I said, as Mike's like writing assistant. And then that movie ended. I got a job on Saturday Night Live, and that movie had come out. So Lorne had conceivably seen the movie or knew Dr. Evil was him, but he would never say anything. He would never ever show sort of any weakness or sort of admit to me. And I was way too terrified to bring it up. Right. But like later, as I worked with him more, and then he produced Baby Mama as well, there would be certain things that like, there were such Dr. Evil type phrases, not just his voice, but just the stuff he talks about. And, you have to stifle laughter. Like I remember he was saying something about Baby Mama, and he wasn't, he says stuff like, people don't like movies with snow. You know what I mean? Like he's always like a grand pronounce, and you're like, well, Fargo, right? Like Fargo, like there's always some thing, and it would just sound so perfect. Because I think Mike's genius was not just the voice, but like the kind of stuff that Lorne observes, which are like really funny and true, but super random and sort of exotic, because he does live a life, like a pretty great life that, most of us don't live and everything. And the way he says it just assumes that everyone lives that life, and
right. You know what I'm talking. I was at a party last summer, and I ran into someone who I knew from way back at SNL, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I was just talking to Lorne. He's working on a blueberry farm investment." And then I was like, "What?" Like, of course, we all have blueberry farms somewhere. And then later in the conversation, she mentioned his pencil factory that he was doing in Canada somewhere, and I was like, "He's got a pencil factory? What?" That's where the money is, I guess.
I remember, I'll give you a Lorne Mike, and I remember this, so it must be true, but it also maybe is slightly exaggerated. But so while I got the job on Saturday Night Live, and that's at the same time when I was writing Austin Powers 2 with Mike, which was a lot because I was a pretty young person in my career. So Saturday Night Live, as you probably know, they'll do like 2 or 3 episodes in a row and then take a week off or 2 weeks off, and they're off completely when they're off. So I would then fly back to LA and be writing Austin Powers 2 with Mike. So in one of those times, I was in LA, but I was working on Saturday Night Live. Mike actually had a meeting with Lorne, just like a lunch or something like that. And Mike and I were out doing something else. So basically, Mike and I were going to drive to meet Lorne, and Mike was going to have his lunch and I was going to go have my lunch or whatever, so essentially like dropping him off, you know what I mean, to have lunch with Lorne. And it was in Beverly Hills at one of those fancy, at a nice men's store. You know how like men look like, those guys look super casual, but you can tell it's very expensive. I'm forgetting the brand, but one of those nice brands. But I literally remember we pulled up to the parking lot or valet, and the way we pulled up, there was a window into the store, and Lorne was trying on like pajama tops. You know what I mean? And so my memory of it is that like I looked up from the car and saw him, and he saw me seeing him. You know what I mean? Like doing something intimate. And what percentage of that now is a made-up memory? I don't know. Like, could I swear that it's pajama tops? I know it doesn't seem right, but I really feel like that's what it was. But like he's everybody's comedy dad if you work with him. You know, he's good. He says a bunch of crazy stuff, and a lot of it's actually pretty insightful, and most of it's interesting. And then you always are sort of like, oh, I hope I hope my dad likes me.
But there was a lot of controversy about the Goldmember title, and then also Austin Pussy, and like getting those through the pipeline. Did you guys have to deal with any of that, or is that even interesting?
Yeah, there's always. I remember there's controversy just in like, is it inappropriate and dirty, and then is it just too stupid, and then there was actually there was like copyright controversies. We used to do a lot of fake titles, you know what I mean? Like, so on scripts and stuff, we would do stuff like Austin Pussy or Four Eyes On. You know, we would just do like Endless or Austin Powers 2, Electric Boogaloo. Like, we'd do all kinds of fake titles, and sometimes I think those would like get circulated, and someone would panic and be like, "You can't do that! You can't do that!"
Oh, right. There was Wrath of Khan, Austin Powers 2.
Yeah.
Khan was like somebody was suing or something, right?
That was like I mean, that obviously started just as a joke literally for the printed script, you know. But then it was pretty funny. I think for a while Mike did entertain that notion of actually having that be the title. But I do remember, I know what you're talking about with the James Bond stuff, but you really can't. I think they just make a lot of noise, but you really can't copyright titles. You know, I think for legal stuff, I don't think they really have any leg to stand on. So I think they just bluffed and made noise, but you can kind of do whatever you want when you're spoofing something like that on a title. Austin Pussy, I think, was nixed for obvious reasons.
Well, Austin Pussy is the title of the movie in the movie, or no?
Yes, right. But it could not be the title of the, you know what I mean? Like, of the movie, because for marketing challenge reasons.
Right.
But although, let's get back to the fact though, it literally was a James Bond movie called Octopussy. I mean, it's really like a giant action, big budget movie was called that in this world. So
talk about Austin Pussy for a minute, because that's nothing more than I love is a movie within a movie that makes fun of the movie you're making and meta.
Right.
Meta. How was that? Suddenly you're making a movie with Spielberg and Tom Cruise and John Travolta and
yeah.
Heather,
that was classic. That's very much like Mike Meyers, because we had that idea, you know what I mean, of doing it, and it's very easy to write that, you know what I mean, because you're like, let's think of the biggest stars and who would be funny, but the whole time in your head you're sort of going, well, we probably won't get all these people, you know what I mean, or any of these people, so like, what else could we do? You know, and Mike just has this, mostly good, but good or evil reality distortion field, you know, like a lot of creative people. And he's coming off some hit movies, you know, so he had some mojo, as Austin Powers would say. And he would always just be like, nope, we'll get them. You know what I mean? We'll just go to them and they'll do it because it'll be funny and they'll want to seem funny and they'll do it. And like he knew Steven Spielberg a little bit, I think. And maybe Gwyneth, but you know, it's not like he was, you always think like, oh, you know, he's just Hollywood cocktail party best friends with all these people, but it wasn't like that. You know, my memory is that maybe he did get Spielberg first, because Spielberg just, you know, has a good sense of humor and was probably like asking Spielberg to be in something maybe is a little more flattering, right, to Spielberg,
right? Whereas
like asking Tom Cruise to be in a movie is just what he has to do every day. And then maybe I think once Spielberg did it, that gave it, you know, kind of an aura of like legitimacy.
Right.
And then it was funny, but I remember we wrote that section early. And like I said, because it's easy to write, you're just spoofing yourself and exaggerating. And you can easily imagine, you know, exactly how you want Tom Cruise to do it. And I want to say each one of those parts was exactly who we wanted, or like, you know, who we wrote in the script. Like, I don't think we had to recast.
Any behind the scenes stuff you'd want to share, or a story from the set?
These are all my stories, I think. No, I can't think of any. I did not come prepared at all.
That's fine. I didn't either. All right, I'm going to do the last couple segments here. The
Is
first
this the
one,
hot seat? Is this the hot seat?
you're not going in the hot seat. I got a hot seat for you. Unless you want to, I could think of something.
Oh no.
Um,
Blank seat.
we do a segment on the last talk show called Tips for Kids because
Okay.
this program is brought to you by Musack.org, supports kids music programs everywhere.
Come on, guys, help the kids out. Go to Musack.org. No, that's the way you spell it.
Michael, do you have any tips for kids?
That's the segment?
Yes.
It's that open-ended?
It could be about writing. Maybe it's something you're an expert in.
Tips for kids. Well, definitely for writing. It's a boring tip, but you just start writing. Always be writing something. I'm sure you were the same way, but I can remember when I was a kid, I got my typewriter out and I wrote stories. And then the flip side of that, not to sound like a school teacher, but read. It really helps your writing. Tip I'm giving my kids now, I don't know if it's a tip, but really is go out and build a fort. It's sometimes you spend a lot of time inside on a computer. It's hard to remember other stuff that you did, but building a fort is the perfect size project. It'll get you out there, and it's always fun.
Mike, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. Now,
Okay.
Now that we've talked about it.
Why did you say you weren't going to do it so much?
I didn't think I would, but now it feels like we should because we've talked about not doing it so much.
Yeah.
Mike, you're in the hot seat.
Yeah.
What is the hunk of the movie you wish of the three movies you wish you could take out now? And what is the part of the three movies you wish you could that is your favorite thing?
I don't know. My favorite thing just because, and it's like silly reasons. I think it's in the second movie. So I worked on the first movie, like I said, as Mike's writing assistant, and I was there on the set. It was kind of his right-hand man. And then on the second movie, he asked me to co-write it with him, right? So it was a huge opportunity that he gave me. So obviously I was really nervous. But I remember on the second movie, a sequence I wrote, I think they're tracking like Dr. Evil's rocket through space. And it's very silly, they're tracking on radar and stuff. And so somebody will say something like, oh my God, look, that looks like a giant. And then you cut too early to the next scene. And a guy goes, Dick, look over here on the radar screen. And it literally is just a series of cut to jokes about how the thing looks like a penis. And it's just like incorporating penis puns into those little mini scenes. Classic Austin Powers. But I just remember when I wrote that and then Mike was like, aha, that's so funny. I felt like, that's going to work. That's funny. And it was funny. And they were filmed really funny and it worked as a sequence. And certainly if anything boils down those movies to their core, it's that sort of penis joke. You want me to do what part I would take out?
Yeah, if you have something.
No, honestly, I think there was one part it's like when Fat Bastard, there's a point where where Austin drinks Fat Bastard's poop in the lab sample and thinks it's coffee. That was probably like a step too far for me. It probably offended my gentle sensibilities.
I remember probably 15 years ago, I was having a conversation about that and you being, or 20 years ago, when you were doing it, I think you're like, he's literally drinking poop.
That's too much. The bunch of penis puns in a row, that's classic. That's funny. This drinking poop, that's too far. Yeah, the judge has decided.
We're going to do the last talk show lightning round. The last great movie you saw.
Oh my God, I haven't seen any movies. I saw Do the Right Thing again, not very new, but I watched it in the context of what's happening now, and it was incredible. If anything, more powerful than it was 20 years ago or more. Incredible.
Last thing you and Mike Meyers talked about.
Last thing me and Mike Tires. Well, this is a little bit secret. He is doing a show for Netflix. He's doing, like a limited series kind of show for Netflix. And I went in the city and just helped him a little bit, heard it like sounding board and helped him out a little bit. So we talked about that. But then he's had 3 kids in the meantime, so now I got the jump on him in that area. So we probably talked about his kids was the last thing we talked about.
The last great meal you had?
The last great meal I had, not at a restaurant. Listen, last night, my wife made the Thai turkey burgers, with the cilantro and the jalapeno and kind of some banh mi kind of things. I guess it's a little more Vietnamese. And then you put that in the turkey burger, and then you have a sriracha mayos, and you have peanuts on there, on the burger, and then pickles. That was pretty great. And then she made an apple cake.
Can you have her send us that recipe?
Yeah, it's super good. You'd like it. It's like banh mi turkey burger.
Last thing that made you anxious?
This very Zoom call. And the audience does not know that I missed it and messed it up and went late on my hike with no phone service. And so I was right to be nervous about it. I completely screwed it up.
And last thing that made you optimistic?
What's the thing that I feel optimistic pretty much every day, even though things are pretty bad. I guess it's kind of corny, but like I said, we're both on the East Coast. The weather has really turned the last week, you know what I mean? And it's fall, but it's not that cold. So you wake up and it's sweater weather, and then in the middle of the day, it's maybe high 60s and breezy. So it's hard to, even with all of our tough times, it's hard not to be optimistic when the day is like that, Yeah. Also, the start of football season. That's politically and everything else much more complicated. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me happy.
and Michael, I will give you the last word.
I wish I could be there watching. Not necessarily Austin Powers 2 and 3, I'll admit, but I wish I could be at the drive-in.
Thank you, Michael McCullers. Everybody enjoy The Spy Who Shagged Me and Goldmember double feature.
Thanks for watching. Bye.